Well, hello to all of my methodical researchers out there. This is a video about dockets, and we are going to rock it. So get ready, Freddy. We are nearing the end of the course. Okay, so what is a docket? Well, in the judicial context, a docket is simply a formal record of a case. It's where the judge notes all of the proceedings, all of the different filings. So not only does it have your opinions, but it also has got your complaints, your motions, your orders, all of that good stuff that as attorneys we know and love. Okay, so why on earth do we care? Why do we care about dockets? Well, there are actually quite a few reasons. One common situation where dockets come up quite frequently is when there's a new filing in an important case. This, of course, includes filings in your newsworthy cases that might involve political figures, celebrities, or especially contentious issues in society. But there's also a pretty decent chance that one day a partner at a law firm will ask you to find the latest opinion or the latest motion or order or whatever it is in some ongoing case that's significant in the area of law in which she practices. And it's really nice to have some basic familiarity with dockets so you can find it straight away for them. Now, another reason that you want to be familiar with dockets is that the docket does a much better job of telling the story of the case than any single opinion that you might look at. In fact, the way that you read opinions for legal research and for law school classes is really pretty misrepresentative of litigation as a whole, especially when you're talking about the trial level of litigation. We tend to focus on these detailed opinions where the judge resolves some dispositive motion, like a motion for summary judgment or a motion to dismiss, and the judge lays out his or her reasoning very, very carefully for us to analyze, for us to use in our legal arguments. But those, of course, are only a very small portion of the filings that you're going to find in any given case. In addition to that, you've got the motion itself, plus the reply from the opposition, plus the actual order that the judge probably drafted and released alongside that very helpful opinion. And then you've got all of the other, just incidental details almost that are involved with this messy process of litigation. Complaints, notices, appearances, scheduling orders, lots of fun and exciting things that all have their own documentation. It is all very, very complex, and I think it is important for you to conceptually be able to appreciate that the opinions that we usually look at and analyze are really just the tip of the iceberg. And it also does have some practical significance, if that helps you. If you're relying upon one case really heavily, for example, you're probably going to want to know more about it. How did it start? What issues arose throughout the litigation? The answers to these things will help to give you context for the opinion and the holding that you really care about, and that context will make you so much better at explaining the case, at presenting the case when you mention it in a brief or a legal argument. And it can also help you to advise a client if you can see how the litigation on a similar issue for a different client in a different case usually proceeds. The docket from that similar case can really help you to know just what to expect. Now, you also need to be familiar with dockets just because of the simple fact that you'll be using dockets, and you'll be using them a lot. If as a lawyer you're ever involved with litigation, the docket will be your primary vehicle for interacting with that litigation. It's where the judge will make requests. It's where the judge is going to distribute orders. It's where you and the other party will submit your filings, although procedural rules may require you to mail them as well, although the parties usually waive those. In a real sense, the docket is basically where the case takes place. Now, if you're in federal court, you're going to use a system they call PACER to access the docket for your case. And if you're in Georgia, it's going to be Peach Court or eFile Georgia. And these are systems that, you'll use, you'll gain experience with, you'll get better at. Now, finally, last but not least, dockets can be really useful almost as like a secondary source. What I'm talking about here is when you can find a case similar to your case and then access the docket for that case, you can locate the briefs for that case. And when you look at the arguments in that case on the same legal issue that you're dealing with, that might give you ideas about the arguments you want to make and the best way to frame them. Looking at the cases and statutes the parties cite in their briefs on that same issue can also help you to find cases and statutes that are relevant to your research. It's a really helpful finding tool. Okay, so let's take a quick look at a docket and some docket materials, just so you can get an idea of how this works and what I'm talking about. We'll go ahead and just start out by checking out an actual trial docket at the Cobb County Superior Court. I chose this one because the docket searching is fairly fully featured. It's pretty easy to use with quite a few options for searching. You're not necessarily going to have it this good as far as searching dockets with other courts. And we just want our court record search. That's usually what you're going to look for. That or docket search is usually going to be the nomenclature for most court websites. And you can see that we really have quite a few different options for how we might want to search for a case, or search for a docket rather. We can search by name, by case number, by the type of case, by the attorneys involved. All of these helpful fields that might be very useful to us in finding a docket that we're looking for in our legal research. We're not really looking for anything in particular here. I just want to show you what this looks like. So we're just going to search by case type. And we'll just choose an action for damages. We'll choose a case type of damages. And, you know, I love torts more than anything else in life. And the damages category, the damages case type, it should capture most of kind of your garden variety torts cases, although the case type is going to depend somewhat upon how the court parties phrased it and filed it and how the clerk of court categorized it. And we'll go ahead and narrow that a little bit, just using more or less arbitrary dates. Then we'll search. Now, looking at our search results, I think most of the fields that we see are more or less self-explanatory. We've got our plaintiffs, defendants, the filing date over here, case type, case title or caption, all concepts that we're pretty familiar with. We've got the judge here as well. So yeah, I mean, it's not that difficult to use. Not every search user interface that you're going to run across is going to be quite as user-friendly as what you see here, though, but you're going to see most of the same fields at least. So just looking over these, this one at least has kind of an interesting case caption, interesting case title, Cowabunga versus Watson. Yeah, let's check it out. I have no idea what it's about. Never looked at it before. So we can click on the document icon here to just go into the docket itself. And you can see here on the docket, there are a bunch of tabs. We start on parties. That's helpful. It tells us, who was involved in this litigation. But what we're the most interested in are our litigation documents or pleadings. And that's this tab here. And so you can see here that we start with the complaint. And then we've got all of the other filings in chronological order until we get to the last filing, that looks like on July the 14th, at the bottom here. And each of the filings, has its own pleading number, starting with number 1 for the complaint. Pretty simple stuff, pretty straightforward in its organization. But I do think you can at least get a sense of the complexity and sort of the multifaceted nature of litigation just by looking at this random civil case. You've just got such a wide variety of miscellaneous filings, miscellaneous documents. These titles, they're somewhat descriptive. They tell us sort of the genre, the type of document that we're dealing with for that particular filing. But it's really hard to know what's actually happening without drilling down and looking at some of this stuff. So let's just check out this motion to intervene. And as you can see, this is just a scan of the motion as it was received by the clerk of court. And this is pretty typical. Usually a motion is going to be pretty short, pretty to the point, the sort of thing you're mostly going to rely on a form to draft. And all of the action and analysis is really going to be in the associated brief. So let's check that out. Let's close out the actual motion, and then let's navigate to the brief itself. And here you go. It's really not that dissimilar from what you would write in your foundations class. This could also be a really helpful source for you to use if you were trying to intervene in a similar case, because you would probably cite similar sources and you might make similar arguments. It could be a great way for you to own in on those arguments and find those sources. So let's also just take a quick look at the docket materials that you can find on Westlaw. And you can find similar sources, similar functionality on Lexis as well. But here we're just going to focus on Westlaw. And we're looking at Obergefell versus Hodges, the famous Supreme Court case. Now, we can access the docket materials by just going to our Filings tab. See that we have 382 filings for this one. And this is actually going to give us a selection of docket materials from all of the different stages of the litigation, starting at the trial court, going through the appeals, to the petition for cert, the cert grant, all of that stuff. And we'll go ahead and just narrow it to trial court documents. And do note that this doesn't actually capture, everything in that trial court docket. You're not going to necessarily get all of the tiny notices, scheduling orders, and stuff like that. It's mainly going to focus on your briefs and motions and stuff of that sort. Let's actually narrow it to focus only on motions and memoranda. And just to get an idea, let's look at this plaintiff's reply in support of their motion for summary judgment here. We click on that. And you can look at it in sort of this HTML format that we see here, where it's formatted like other Westlaw sources that we use. And we've got, our hyperlinks and linked footnotes and sources throughout. Or, if you prefer, you can look at it in like the original format as a PDF. You're not necessarily going to have that available for every single document. And this is how, it was originally formatted when it was submitted by the litigants. Now, through Westlaw, you can also actually just check out the actual docket itself. Filter it to Dockets. And just choose any of these. These are dockets from like the different stages of litigation. However, you should note, as we scroll down through this long docket, that this is going to give you, a record of the proceedings, but you're not going to have like the filings themselves linked to it like we saw on like the Cobb County Court's site. You can find like some of the highlights, like I mentioned, if you go to the other filings, and you filter by other things aside from dockets, like the brief that we just looked at. But this can still be a useful source if you just want to know what happened in this case. One word of warning, the collection of dockets and docket materials that you're going to find on Westlaw and Lexis is really far from complete. This is going to be especially true of the state courts. You're not going to have all the filings available for many of the cases that you'll see, and you're not going to have any filings available for some cases that you might run into. But I do think you can see just from these examples how the docket materials, such as briefs and motions, if not the docket itself, can be such a useful resource on Westlaw that you can almost use it like a secondary source. If you can find a case that seems really spot on, look at your filings tab, see if you've got filings available. If you find a brief under those filings, that could direct you to really important sources and give you ideas for arguments you might have otherwise missed. And of course, dockets and docket materials have many other uses as well, which I described earlier. Okay, that's all I have for now. Until next time.